Greetings, DFG here, Gideon's Fight. Hey guys, I want to take a moment and talk just real briefly about a social issue that's very hot right now in our country. It's always been here. Sometimes overtly, sometimes subvertly, or subvertly, I'm sorry, where you don't necessarily see it because it kind of goes underground from time to time, but socially has never really truly been addressed and dealt with, and that's racism. And I just want to take a quick second and just give you an idea of what it was like. Two incidents that came, and I'm talking about the subvert, racial bias that unfortunately happens, and yet people don't really take notice that it is happening. Two examples. Just the other day I was talking to an East Indian friend of mine, and we were just talking about observation of people, and in this case someone that had paid this particular individual a compliment. And so I said, well, really, that was very nice that they would say that. Yeah, she said it was an American guy, because I asked her, I said, was it and she's East Indian, and I said, was it an American guy? Or East Indian guy, I'm sorry. And she said, no, he was an American guy. I said, okay, American guy, okay, great. I said, well, what color was he? She said he was white. And I said, okay, fine. And then so as the conversation just went about another 30 seconds later, I asked, I said, tell me something, who is this guy over here, Brandon? How would you address him? Should I address him as a black guy? And then I said, well, what about your friend, and I don't want to give his name up because I don't want, but he's an East Indian, and I say, well, how would you describe him? And she said, well, I would describe him as an East Indian. And it dawned on me that when she said, white, she associated it with American. So she didn't say a white guy, she said an American guy. When it was East Indian, she didn't associate him with brown-skinned or light-skinned, she associated him with East Indian. But when she talked about, the black guy, she didn't associate him with his native country, she associated him based off of his color. Again, racism, but racism subverted. You don't realize, you don't see it, but there it is right there, in your face. White associated with America, East Indian associated with, India, but African American associated simply with black, almost as though blacks are not really Americans. And that was my interpretation of it. And again, you might think I'm being somewhat narrow-minded in that view, but as an African American male, if I am taking the presumption that that's what you're saying, then whether you agree with it or not, my perception of what you're saying is your reality at the end of the day. And that kind of, again, subvert racism happens all the time, and I'm only bringing it up because of just so that you possibly could be more socially aware that when you're associating, how do you associate? Ask yourself the question, honest question. When you see someone black, do you see American or do you see black? When you see someone white, do you see white or do you see an American? Or if you see an East Indian, do you see brown-skinned or light-skinned, or do you see someone from, India? And I could associate that obviously around the world, whether you're Australian, South American, Brazilian, Ecuadorian, etc. And then the other situation that came up was just on my air trip, on my plane trip here to New Orleans, and I'm sitting next to a Japanese lady and a Caucasian male, white male, and the white male asked the Japanese lady, well, are you visiting or touring New Orleans? She said, yeah, I'm touring. He said, okay, well, when you go to New Orleans, he said, then here are some of the places that you want to know about. And so he described, the Garden District, nice houses, the French Quarters. And he said, here are all the good areas that you can go to and places you can go to. And then he stopped, and I didn't stop, and then he said, but now these are all the bad areas. And it was interesting that he started describing all the areas where African American, or areas in New Orleans that are heavily populated with African Americans. And I mean, he described the whole city as though he was looking at a map, and because he's from New Orleans, or from the area, and he was in the pockets that I'm looking at. If he doesn't know I'm looking and listening, he doesn't realize that I'm aware of this situation, or the conversation, I'm sorry. And he shows us all these little areas that are bad areas. Not that the crime in this area are any worse than anywhere else in the city, but these particular areas were clearly identified by the white male to the Japanese female that she should avoid going to those areas at all costs, as though crime doesn't happen, across the city, regardless of the city's ethnic breakout. New Orleans is a very diverse city, so you have blacks and white that lives all through the city, but you do have concentrated areas of blacks and some concentrated areas of white. And I bring it up again because I have to ask myself the question, I wonder if it had been, an African-American lady sitting next to him, would he have asked her where she was, traveling, or she was touring? Would he have asked her or warned her about the areas that were great to go visit than the areas, to stay away from? And maybe he would have. I suspect he wouldn't have. And again, convert, or subvert, racism, maybe even subconscious or unconscious racism, but there it is, and there it exists. And so, just again, keeping it real, keeping it honest, being open. The only way that we're going to ever be able to truly confront bigotry, class racism, or ethnic, color racism, color bias, is that we're going to have these conversations. And the more we pretend like, these subjects are taboo, the more people get offended because of these kind of conversations that I'm having right now, and want to, ostracize or a better word, stigmatize, people like myself, and say, well, you're making this stuff up and you create. No, the problem is if we don't have these conversations, if I don't talk about these things, and you're not willing to hear what I'm saying, you don't have to agree with me. But if you don't hear what I'm saying, then the problem will continue to exist, and we'll continue to pretend as though we don't notice the black guy in the room or the white lady in the room. And until we get to the place where we don't notice the black guy in the room or the white lady in the room, this ugly monster that divides us, that keeps us, limited as far as what our true potential is as human beings. Forget America. But as human beings, until we start to look at these, again, subconscious, racist, situations, we're not going to be able to fix the problem. And that's what this is about. Let's talk about it, and let's talk about it openly. Let's not be ashamed or afraid. I was talking to another young male, Caucasian, white American, and he was telling me that there are times that he said there's a term that is called white fright. And he said what white fright is that they're not fearful of blacks. What they are fearful is of a conversation, of offending somebody that's African American, based off of what they might say or how they're saying things. So they have to stay away from certain words, even though they may hear those words being used by African Americans. They know that if they use that same word, where if the African Americans are using the word, it's a good conversation and it's friendly, almost in terms of endearment. But if he came and says the same thing, or they overheard him saying that, it would be only second to, the hostility towards him would be, equivalent to some major race war, which is unfair to him, I might add, because if it's okay to use the word, it's okay to use the word. If it's not okay to use the word, then it's not okay to use the word. It should have nothing to do with someone's ethnic makeup, especially when it comes down to, to things of color. So anyway, there you have it. Let's talk at the end of the day. Let's keep talking. And I think that if we're honest enough to recognize, first of all, that it does exist, and then it can be fixed, it can be corrected, then obviously, we can make progress, as a nation, and more importantly, we can make progress, as a people. Okay? I guess I heard someone say that the only type of I don't want to misquote him, but he was talking about kinds of people, breakouts of people, and he said there's only one true race, and that is the human race. And I couldn't agree with him more. Now you know, DFG, Gideon's Fight. Thanks for listening. Goodbye.